Hello, baseball fans, collectors, and investors, and welcome back to Iconic Baseball. I am Iconic Al, and I'm very excited about today's episode as a lifelong Pirates fan and someone who grew up in Pittsburgh. Number 94 on the top 100 count up is someone that is on the Mount Rushmore of Pirates players, and someone who, as someone growing up in Pittsburgh, has been revered and celebrated by the city as long as I can remember. Someone who led the Pirates to two World Series titles in the 70s, and to this day is still known as simply Pops. I'm talking about the great Willie Stargell.
Take me out to the ball game. Take me out with the crowd. Buy me some peanuts and cracker jack. I don't care if I never get back. Let me root for the home team. If they don't win, it's a shame. For it's 1, 2, 3 strikes, you're out at the old ball game.
Here he is, Willie Stargell, Hall of Famer, and Pittsburgh's Mr. October. One of the great Pirates in baseball history. And as a Pirates fan, yes, sure, you can say I'm biased. But really, that just speaks to the qualitative nature of an iconic top 100 list. I mean, everyone, as collectors, as fans, that's what it's all about. I mean, we make qualitative judgments on top of quantitative judgments in order to arrive at the players that we love, the players that we collect. So let's go into some of Willie Stargell's stats here. He compiled 57.5 WAR, a 282 career hitter, respectable, 475 home runs, which is big power. He played a long career with the Pirates from 1962 to 1982. So he played a long time. He won the MVP award in 1979, as well as the World Series MVP award that same year. He finished in the top 10 of MVP voting 6 times. So he definitely was one of the best players in baseball for an extended period of time. One of the most feared sluggers of his or any era. He was a leader on that team. So you look at the stats, which are impressive, but what doesn't show on that stat line that I just read was his leadership role in the postseason, his leadership role on the teams of the 70s. He was really the father figure of that team. Pops. That's why they called him Pops. He was the veteran. He was the leader. He would award stars to players on their hats. You know, when the Pirates wore those pillbox hats, he actually awarded stars to players that did something outstanding. So he created a culture on the Pirates in the 70s that was a winning culture, and it really rubbed off on everyone on those teams. And that's what he's remembered for. That's what makes him iconic. Sure, his numbers are great, but a lot of other players fall in this range of 55 to 75 WAR, and us as collectors have to decide, all right, if I'm only going to whittle my collection down to the top 100, and you included everyone over 55 WAR, you would you would not have a top 100. You would have a top 200. You would have a lot more players than you'd probably want to collect. So that speaks to each individual has to make that determination on their own, a qualitative assessment. What is iconic to you? Based on where you grew up, what your frame of reference is. You know, if you're a Cubs fan, yeah, Willie Stargell may not make your top 100. It's probably Ryan Sandberg, maybe Fergie Jenkins. If you're from Houston, maybe it's Jeff Bagwell or Craig Biggio. If you're from Milwaukee, yeah, maybe it's Robin Yount. Maybe it's Paul Molitor. If you're a Yankees fan, maybe it's Don Mattingly. Maybe it's Roger Maris. They all belong in the conversation. If it's Minnesota, maybe it's Harmon Killebrew. If it's Seattle, maybe you love Edgar Martinez. They all fall in that range of, 55 to 75 WAR, certainly deserving Hall of Famers, with the exception of, I think, Don Mattingly. He falls below that range. Roger Maris also falls below that range statistically, but you can't deny the iconic value of a Don Mattingly or Roger Maris. So it all comes down to you as a fan. What do you value? And how iconic is that player to you in your frame of reference? Because we all have a different history and a different frame of reference. For me, Willie Stargell checks all the boxes. I mean, he has good enough stats to warrant being in this list for me. And also, he is one of those, Mount Rushmore figures growing up as a Pirates fan. So, yes, with my frame of reference, it's Willie Stargell. You can't collect everybody. And honestly, you shouldn't collect everybody. In my mind, I want a small collection. I want a small but focused collection of players that mean something to me that also I believe will appreciate over time. And that's generally my ethos. It's collect elite players, curate your collection so that it's not massive, so that it's not a lot of fluff. It's not a lot of players that people generally don't care about or don't want. Because honestly, there are almost 300 players in the Hall of Fame. That's a lot of players. And if you're trying to collect every player in the Hall of Fame, to be quite honest, there are a lot of players in the Hall of Fame that really aren't collectible, that really will not appreciate over time. So my general ethos is to focus on that upper echelon and somewhat middle echelon of Hall of Famer, to whittle it down to what are my, top 100 most elite players of all time. That's what I try to do in my collection. You obviously can do anything you want in your collection. I'm not trying to tell you how to collect, but what I found in my 30 years of doing this is those are the players that tend to really appreciate over time, and they age much better. Let's get to the items here. The first here is the signed baseball that I got. Was actually one of the first legends or Hall of Famers that I ever got signed in person. This is an autograph that I got from Willie Stargell himself around 1999 at a signing outside of Three River Stadium in Pittsburgh. And he couldn't have been nicer. I was in my teens at the time, and he signed this ball. It's an official National League ball. Sweet spot signature. At the time, in my teenage years, I didn't know probably so much not to touch baseballs with my bare hands. Now I know. And for you younger collectors out there, nice to invest in a pair of these cotton gloves just for handling baseballs, so you don't have to worry about placing a fingerprint that then creates oils which build up on the ball, which then can discolor the ball over time. Now I got this ball signed over 20 years ago, and you can see that there's a bit of a smudge across the Stargell there. And that's probably because at some point when I was younger, the ball got touched by a sweaty hand or was not handled properly. And now there's a bit of a discoloration over the Stargell. Thankfully, it's still a nice signature. It doesn't really detract too much from the value or the eye appeal of the ball, but going forward, good practice not to touch a baseball, especially on the leather surfaces of the ball, with your bare hands. FYI, PSA. All right, this other item here is Sports Illustrated from 1971, which was the first World Series that the Pirates won with Stargell. And I got this in a trade a long time ago from a friend of mine. I forget what I traded for this, but it's autographed here, Willie Stargell, in blue pen, and he signed his number, 8. It's a pretty cool period piece that takes you back to that 1971 championship season. It's been quite a while since Pittsburgh has overpowered anybody, so it's kind of cool to look back at an old Sports Illustrated where the Pirates were actually dominant, something that I've waited a long time to see in my lifetime. But I'm hopeful that someday the Pirates will again be dominant. I might be waiting a while, but always hopeful. And then this card over here is a 1971 Topps Willie Stargell from that same year. 1971, his first World Series championship year. And this is graded a PSA 7, near mint, which for this card is pretty nice grade. Black borders. It's a very difficult grade for a 1971 Topps. And he's just sort of entering his prime seasons here in 1971. He's still a relatively young player, just hitting his stride as a major league star. And I just love vintage cards. I was looking at populations on that, and There's been like 1,200 graded by PSA of that card. About 500 so have received a 7, so it's actually a pretty common grade, but I highly doubt that there will be many more added to that population now. It's been quite a while since 1971, and you can be pretty well assured that the populations of a card like that are pretty well set. And there's only 400 examples graded higher than that. So I like looking at vintage pops because there aren't many. The population numbers are much smaller than, say, modern cards. And it's nice to say, okay, well, there's only 400 in the world graded higher than mine. So it gives you some scarcity. And it's an iconic image. I love the color, the black border, the yellow pirates font. It's a classic 70s. And I also like they signed his full first name here, Wilver. I had no idea Willie Stargell's first name was Wilver. In fact, I've never even heard of the name Wilver. Anyway, that's my quick take on Willie Stargell. If you like what I'm doing here, let me know about it. Like, follow, subscribe, and until next time, keep collecting and stay iconic.